watching The Pulse, your weekly guide to global health on Al Jazeera. I'm Shireen Al-Feki. In today's program, we're taking a look at the global fight against malaria. Now, malaria has plagued mankind for millennia. As many as 500 million people in Africa, Asia, and Latin America are infected. Now, this is not just a matter of fever and chills. Malaria kills at least 1 million children a year. What the world needs is a vaccine. But the parasite which causes malaria is an elusive enemy. We begin with a tale of two researchers in America and Africa and their race to make malaria history. There's a ruthless killer stalking children across Africa. According to the World Health Organization, a child dies from malaria every 30 seconds. While new drugs and bed nets are beginning to reach those in need, the death toll from malaria continues to rise. So the race is on, with teams around the world trying to produce a vaccine. One of those teams is led by Steve Hoffman and his company Malaria in the United States.
My whole career had really been dedicated to trying to prevent tropical infectious diseases and the incredible morbidity and mortality that they were wreaking in the world. And of course, malaria is #1 in that regard. And so I said, look, we know what we're up against here. This is not going to be simple, but I want to give it a try.
It's not just because I'm married to Steve that I then automatically believe in his ideas. I truly believe, from a scientific point of view, if you look at the data, that this makes complete sense.
Making a malaria vaccine is tough. The parasite which causes malaria is complex, splitting its life between mosquitoes and man. The tricky part is getting the right bit of the malaria parasite into a vaccine to stimulate the right bit of the body's immune defenses. On the shores of the Indian Ocean is Bagamoyo District Hospital in Tanzania. Here, another team is making strides in the vaccine race. They're working with a vaccine called RTSS, developed by drug giant GSK. It uses biotechnology to make a particular part of the malaria parasite to stimulate immunity. If successful, this vaccine could be saving children in 3 to 4 years. Dr. Salim Abdallah and his colleague Dr. Omar Ali Juma at Bagamoyo are testing the new vaccine with the help of local people. The first step is carefully preparing the vaccine under the close watch of the hospital pharmacist. Then the vaccine is used to immunize 300 children in the trial. Results from an earlier test in Mozambique were encouraging, cutting cases of malaria by more than 30%. Dr. Abdallah and his colleagues are hoping for similar success. In Rockville, Maryland, Dr. Steve Hoffman heads to work at Malaria. He started the company 3 years ago with an ambitious goal: to create the world's first malaria vaccine that could protect up to 90% of immunized children. At Malaria, they're taking a different approach to GSK. They use whole malaria parasites, not parts made in a test tube, to mimic a natural infection. The trick is to do this without actually causing malaria. The first step is to grow large quantities of the malaria parasite in human blood cells. Next, the blood is fed to mosquitoes so that the parasite can develop to the next stage of its life cycle, the sporozoite. That's the part of the parasite that's transmitted to humans. Once the parasites have multiplied inside the mosquito, it's time to neutralize them. The mosquitoes are hit with an exact dose of radiation, enough to make sure that the parasites inside are weakened so as not to cause disease, but not too much radiation, as that would make them useless as a vaccine. In this vital stage, the salivary glands containing the weakened parasites are removed. The parasites are then separated from the glands and purified to produce the final vaccine. Over in Tanzania, results for the RTSS malaria vaccine are coming in.
So these are slides of children that have completed the vaccination, and we are preparing slides to identify if the sample collected from these children have malaria parasites. And this gives an indication of the possibility that the vaccine can confer protection against malaria infection.
In America, Scenaria is moving to a new facility to produce enough of the vaccine for early-stage clinical trials. But final results are years away.
My hope is that we're going to produce a malaria vaccine that meets everybody's regulatory standards, meets cost of goods standards, so that we can get it to the children in Africa who need it the most to prevent the millions of deaths caused by malaria annually.
We've just seen Steve Hoffman from Scenaria and Salim Abdullah from Bagamoyo Hospital in the film, and they join me now. So, gentlemen, time for an update on your vaccines. Salim.
Yes, the work in Bagamoyo is going on very well. We have finished with enrollment for the ongoing trial, and we are doing a further phase 2 assessment as a second stage to verify the type of schedule that will be provided for the full efficacy evaluation if the current phase 2 program is successful.
Now, what were the results in your early stage phase 1 trial of the vaccine?
The earlier studies were done in the Gambia with adults and also in Mozambique. That was published in 2004 that showed very promising results, and that's why it had paved the way for the current phase 2 program.
So this is a follow-on testing?
It is a follow-on testing.
Steve, what about you?
Well, we've had some fabulous steps forward since the film was made. First was that we actually successfully manufactured the vaccine according to all regulatory FDA regulations 4 times in the spring, and we've actually done what is called released those vaccine lots, meaning they went through extremely rigorous testing by outside companies to make sure that they were sterile, that they were free of contaminating material, safe, and so on. And so that we now have in the bottle enough vaccine to conduct the preclinical toxicology studies, which are going to start in 2 weeks.
So you actually haven't done any testing in animals or in humans on your vaccine?
Not the formal testing.
The way you make your vaccine in terms of dissecting the mosquitoes, frankly, it sounds like something out of science fiction. How are you thinking that you can make enough doses to scale up to vaccinate millions of people, and how are you going to standardize this vaccine?
The answer is that we have a process, we believe, which is easily scalable. Right now, the individual dissectors dissect about 80 to 100 mosquitoes an hour, and each mosquito, we believe, is going to have about 4 doses of vaccine in it, in which case that means one person in 1 hour is producing 400 doses.
But that's hands-on labor. That's hugely expensive to do. Are you thinking of taking this to developing countries?
Yes. So I think that one has to think of something analogous to a chip factory, of which there are many, particularly in Asia. And so that we've already been in contact with a number of different organizations in Asian countries regarding building a manufacturing facility there.
Now, tell me, in 1985, there were no malaria vaccines in clinical trials, and now we've got more than a dozen, and 50 candidate vaccines are in development. What's happened over the intervening period to really revitalize this field? What's going on?
I think the first and most important thing that changed was that the belief that we could make a malaria vaccine, that it is feasible to make a vaccine that is effective and that can be delivered to a majority of the population in need.
Steve, has there been a change in the science, better understanding? Why the sudden spurt?
I think there's multiple factors. When we started doing this in 1984, 85, there were, minimal investors, even from the major funding agencies, and now there's literally, $100 million a year going into it. So it's
more money.
And then in the area of subunit vaccine development is actually advancement of the science. So that when it was first, the malaria vaccine was one of the first recombinant protein vaccines ever put into people.
So more money and more science, really. Now, at this stage, your vaccine may or may not make it. I mean, 80% of vaccines from 1985 have fallen before they reached full-scale clinical trials. The RTSS vaccine is only 30% effective. So again, we're in this position where we don't have a sure shot against malaria. Salim, you're in Tanzania, you're at the front line of dealing with malaria. What do you do until then? Do you have everything you need to tackle malaria?
I think the development of the RTSS vaccine, although it's not perfect, that it's not a silver bullet, but it's better than nothing. So we think that if we do have a vaccine, it will go a long way in contributing towards malaria control in the endemic areas. Also, there are other tools that are already there. So better drugs with artemisinin-containing products, insecticide-treated bed nets, spraying in areas where this is feasible. So the deployment of these control measures has already shown that there is some success, even in areas with very high transmission in Africa. So clearly, we are looking at a scenario where the new tools will be used in combination to control malaria in Africa.
Thanks, Salim. Thanks, Steve. Thank you. Coming up after the break, we look at the latest Chinese takeaway, a powerful treatment for malaria.